everyone, and welcome back to another Exos Heroes video. And today is going to be the first part of our mini-series discussing the Season 2 patch notes, Season 2 changes, and all of the new mechanics that have been introduced to the game. And so, the first thing we want to go over is probably what's on everybody's mind, and that's going to be the battle changes. So, the first thing is mana generation. And we mean specifically mana generation from the elemental affinity that a hero has. Originally, before Season 2, once you hit 5-star, so Fated Heroes have this base, and other heroes would need to get blessed to achieve this, but once you hit 5 stars, you can actually generate mana passively through your element. For instance, if you were Frost, every time somebody, either an enemy or an ally, blocked, you would gain 1 mana. And they have replaced this, and now upon reaching 5-star, 1 mana is generated for heroes on the same row once every round at the start of your own turn. So what this means is, if you have 4 people in the front row, and someone on that row goes, all 4 of them gain mana that turn. And the same goes for the next person and the next person. Now, what this does is, for me, I think it balances out the playing field a little bit. If we think about, the high-level, top-tier PvP, you're typically going to see a Bathory in everybody's team. And that Bathory is normally going to be running with a 6 Frost Guardian Stone set. And this is because it's important to keep Bathory alive, number 1. And so if you could increase the amount she blocks, not only does that help keep her alive, but it also helps her generate mana. And since some of her abilities have burst, this is even more important. So what you have here is essentially multiplicative scaling, where not only do you have higher block, but then it gives you mana, which then gives you more damage, which in a way can help you keep you alive longer. And so what this change does, it helps balance out the playing field a little bit, where the whales or just like the really lucky players who have this gear don't have as significant of an advantage through multiplicative scaling.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. In the past, we definitely see heroes that can take advantage of these elements, and those heroes were, always favored, and obviously players who has more money to spend on the game can benefit from that as well. But now it removes the mana generation and put it into its own category, right? So all the heroes out there just have the same type of mana generating ability. Does it make the game a little bit less interesting? Maybe. We'll talk more about that a little bit later, but definitely from a balancing perspective, I think this has an overall positive effect. However, there are a couple of things we want to point out. One is specifically to heroes that has weak mana generation already, and this is especially a case, I think, for the rare heroes. Under the old mechanics, the rare heroes can still generate decent amount of mana for themselves based on their element. And perfect example that we can think of is Kaya. Kaya used to be, in my opinion, a top tier healer in the game. And that's because despite she has relatively high mana cost on her A1 and A2 cost 3 and 5 mana respectively, she was nature element, and she was able to generate mana pretty consistently and essentially overcome her mana deficiency. But in today's situation, she will only be able to generate 1 mana on her turn, and that's significantly less than she used to have. And this is especially an issue with rare heroes, because unlike fated and legendary heroes who has a little bit of mana generation through their passive, because they typically have level 2 or level 3 passives, rare heroes are stuck with level 1 passives that does not have any mana generation in them at all, right? If we think about First Aid for Kaya, it's just First Aid, there's no mana generation. Counter for Xian, right? There's no mana generation there either. So that becomes an issue, and I think it really cripples rare heroes, and it makes unleashed potential a lot more important. So nowadays, if you want to use rare heroes, you're almost guaranteed to have to undergo unleashed potentials. Otherwise, their mana issue is going to be very crippling. However, there are certain things that can make this a little bit better. One is you can definitely bring mana batteries, and I think mana batteries such as Iris, FC Iris, even heroes like Pan are of higher priority now than they used to be, because the mana generation overall is a little bit less than it was before. So I think those heroes definitely benefited from this change. On the other hand, another way you can potentially counter this is to use a certain type of team composition. So if you want to have Kaya in your team and doesn't have her unleashed potential yet, what you could do is to put a very frontline heavy team. A team that has 4 frontline heroes. So whenever someone gets a turn, they're able to generate 1 mana for everyone else in their role. So that can be a way to help some of the rare heroes or heroes that tend to have mana generation issues. But what it also means is that you're losing out on a lot of flexibility, right? If you want to bring a hero like Kaya into the front line, you definitely need to run at least, I would say, 3 or maybe 4 frontline heroes. On the other hand, we've talked about heroes like Scarlet. Scarlet is a back row hero that also has mana generation issues, so now if you want to run her, you might have to have a very back row focused team comp. So it takes away a lot of that flexibility from the game. But that's our thoughts on the mana generation change. Now let's shift gear and take a look at the changes made to the break effects. So the break effect also changed a little bit, and the changes are very similar to what happened to the mana generation. So we used to have different type of Guardian Stone break effect attached to specific elements. For example, Machine Guardian Stones, if it's broken, the number of turns you're immobilized are twice as long, so it was 14 turns. Or if you are a Nature Guardian Stone and that gets broken, you take additional damage every turn for the duration that you're broken. All of those effects are out of the window now, so the game again, I think, are dumbing it down a little bit, taking away some of that complexity, and instead now, whenever you attack someone who is broken, you get 1 mana back for yourself. So in a way, they just replaced that with essentially another way of generating mana. So I think this is the dev's way to kind of mitigate some of the mana generation lost by the changes we mentioned earlier. But it definitely took away some of the depth that the game used to offer, and I'm going to let Edward to cover that a little bit more.
Right, definitely. I think that this was actually a pretty interesting mechanic, and in my opinion, I think that this was a bad change, because one of the things that we had talked about off the mic was that this isn't a change that really impacts the game, right? When we think about breaking Guardian Stones and breaking that last Guardian Stone, what the effect was, you went over some of them. Did it really have a huge impact on the outcome of the battle? Not really, right? In PvP, you probably aren't going to break someone with 6 Guardian Stones, you would just kill them outright. And then in PvE, it's tuned to a level that's easy enough that you do break Guardian Stones, but the order that you break them doesn't need to be utilized as an important aspect of clearing that stage. So we think that overall, there was no real reason to take this away, other than, like you had mentioned, giving them another way to generate mana and sort of make up for that loss in those previous changes. I mean, ultimately, I understand why they did it. It makes the game a lot more new player friendly, in that if you're somebody that has never played Exos Heroes, you go into the game, and we were still with the Season 1 system where it was this Guardian Stone does this, and there's all of these sort of mechanics around that. It's very confusing to learn and understand. But now they've, dumbed it down, for lack of a better term, and I think that this does help get new players into the game, and it lowers that barrier of entry, which we believe has historically been a problem with Exos Heroes. But if you're a veteran player that's been playing, since day one, you are going to feel like you've lost something, because we are losing this mechanic, and if you were used to it, it was probably nice to have. Another point I want to mention is this makes Guardian Stone breaking more impactful in PvE, but less impactful in PvP. And the reason is, for PvE specifically, you're going to be breaking Guardian Stones a lot. There will be characters that you break, and then the break ends, and you have to break them again and again, especially with the new Chapter 11. It's a big part of how that fight progresses.
Right, the higher tier.
Right,
PvE
the higher tier
scenarios.
PvE content. And so, with that having been said, getting that mana generation is going to be that much more important, and breaking them as fast as possible, as often as possible, is going to be key, I think, in future PvE content. Now, the next change we want to talk about is the elemental damage changes, and there were a couple of questions that we had that we'll address to the audience at the end of this, but let's get to understand what this is first. So, Hal, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the elemental damage is a brand new mechanic that has been introduced as part of the Signature Force mechanic. And what it does is, essentially, when you have unlocked certain levels of the Signature Force, you're able to do an additional elemental damage on top of your regular damage. And this element is specific to the region that you're associated with. We can use Jin as an example. Jin is a machine type hero. Whenever he attacks, he does machine damage and has the ability to break a machine guardian stone. But now if you have Astori's signature force leveled up to level 1 tier 1, or even better, if you can get to level 2, you're able to unlock 1 additional or 2 additional elemental damage respectively. And this will then allow Jin to do additional damage that's associated with Astori's Republic, which is nature. So now he will be able to do the original base attack damage through his skills, but he will also be able to do additional nature damage and break nature guardian stones. And this is a pretty interesting mechanic that has been added that's completely new to the game, and it definitely has a lot of impact, especially when it comes to having the ability to break multiple guardian stones, which have a pretty big impact in both PvE and PvP areas. And a couple of additional things, small nuance that we want to point out is the elemental damage is tied to the amount of mana that's consumed by each skill. So for example, if you're using a skill that only consumes 1 mana, the elemental damage is going to be lower than a skill that consumes 5 mana. Also, the elemental damage is going to be a little bit different for single target skills and AoE skills, where with AoE skills tend to do a little bit less. But up until now, everything is pretty clear, and I think we have a pretty good grasp on them, and I think we are able to explain it to everyone here. But there are a couple of things, specifically with this table that we're going to show in a second, that we just can't quite understand. And I'm going to let Edward to talk a little bit more about these.
Sure. So as you can see in this table here, we have a sort of elemental wheel where it talks about weaknesses and strengths that elements have against each other. And this is a familiar mechanic for those of us who have played games like Summoner's War, where we had a very similar table. Darkness and light are on their own. And so this should be something that we're relatively familiar with. But because it's new to Exo Heroes, there are a couple of questions that we have that we've yet to see anybody answer. And that is, when you look at the table here, we have nature into machine is 100%, and then machine into frost is 100%. First of all, we're not even sure what that 100% means. Our working assumption is that nature to machine is going to do 100% of the elemental damage gained through signature force, which is the 4900. Now, the question is, if you have a hero like Jin, who gets signature forced through Jin'ai, so now he has the nature elemental damage. If he hits machine, it's 100%. So we're assuming that's the 4900. What if he hits nature, right? What if he hits his own elements? What if he hits frost, which is an element that's completely detached from him on this wheel? And what if he hits fire, which is what is strong against nature? So are there like scaling, like if you hit fire, you do 50% less damage, but then what if you hit frost? And so these are all questions that we have that honestly, we were not able to address ourselves because we haven't been able to signature force yet. But for those of you, any whales out there watching, or anybody that somehow managed to have a stockpile of generals, please go test this out and do let us know how these interactions work, because we are very curious to find out.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think this is going to be something that's pretty substantial to the game, right? This new mechanic, we definitely need to understand how it works. But with that being said, hopefully the rest of the video has been helpful to you guys. Hopefully we were able to explain some of these new changes to you guys in a manner that's clear. But if there's anything that you guys still don't understand, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. We're happy to take a look and address them. And also, as we mentioned before, we're going to be putting out more Season 2 related videos in the near future, so stay tuned for those. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next episode very soon. Bye.
Peace.